Have you ever had someone in your life who seemed like a friend, but something just didn't feel right? Maybe you couldn't quite put your finger on it, but their words, their actions, or the way they made you feel left you questioning their true intentions. If you've ever experienced that uneasy feeling, this video is for you. Today, we're diving into a story that might hit close to home for many of us. It's the story of Thomas, a retired schoolteacher who spent his life helping others and trusting easily. But over time, he discovered that not everyone who smiles at you truly wants the best for you. In this video, we'll walk through 5 key signs that can help you identify people who might be hiding envy or hidden motives. By the end, you'll learn how to protect your peace, recognize toxic relationships, and take control of the friendships and connections that truly serve your well-being. Don't miss out on this essential advice. Understanding these signs can change the way you navigate your relationships, allowing you to surround yourself with people who genuinely support you. Stick around to the end to learn the steps you can take to ensure you're nurturing the right relationships and protecting yourself from those who may be unintentionally draining your energy. If you are not subscribed, I recommend subscribing and activating the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support means a lot to me, and if you enjoyed this video, you can help me continue spreading the valuable lessons by liking and sharing it. If you like the topic of this video, please comment 1. If you don't, please comment 0 to let me know how I can improve and make better videos for you. Now, let's begin. Act 1. Thomas's realization. Thomas and Daniel had been friends for what felt like forever. Their paths first crossed at a community event, a simple moment that blossomed into something deep, or so Thomas thought. From the beginning, there was a sense of camaraderie, a connection that felt sincere. They spent countless hours together, exchanging stories and experiences, offering advice, and leaning on each other when life got heavy. Thomas felt he had found someone who truly understood him, someone who could be counted on. Daniel had become a confidant, someone he trusted unconditionally. At least, that's what Thomas told himself. However, over time, tiny cracks began to appear in what seemed like a perfect friendship. At first, the signs were subtle, almost unnoticeable. There was no grand betrayal or glaring problem, just fleeting moments that didn't quite add up. When Thomas shared his good news, Daniel's reactions were lackluster at best. His words were dutifully supportive, but they lacked any real enthusiasm. Thomas would tell him something exciting, something that should have drawn a genuine response, like when he was invited to speak at a local event for retired educators, but all he got in return was a forced smile and a half-hearted comment. "Wow, that's great. They must have been short on speakers this year," Daniel said with a tone that made the words feel empty, almost dismissive. It caught Thomas off guard, but he laughed it off at the time, brushing it aside as an offbeat joke. It wasn't until later, when the excitement had worn off, that the words settled in a little too uncomfortably. Why would a close friend, someone who should have been genuinely proud, say something like that? Was Daniel just making a joke, or was there something more underneath the surface? Thomas couldn't shake the unease that crept into his thoughts. Over time, small but significant things began to surface. Daniel, who had once seemed to be a great sounding board, had become almost unnervingly agreeable. No matter what Thomas said, Daniel seemed to agree without hesitation. There was no challenge, no alternate perspective offered. It should have been comforting, but something about it felt wrong. Real friends push each other, don't they? They argue, they disagree, they help each other grow. Daniel, on the other hand, had fallen into a pattern of telling Thomas exactly what he wanted to hear. It wasn't friendship, it was something far more passive, something that stung more than it soothed. But the real dagger, the undeniable moment that shattered Thomas's perception of their friendship, came on his birthday. His family had organized a small celebration, a gathering full of love and joy. There was laughter, light-hearted moments, and a feeling of peace that wrapped around them all like a cozy blanket. It should have been the perfect day. But then, there was Daniel. He was there, in the midst of it all, laughing along with everyone, participating in the festivities, but Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't anything anyone else could see, it was in Daniel's energy, his eyes. As Thomas unwrapped a thoughtful gift from a close friend, he caught something in Daniel's gaze. It wasn't happiness. It was something colder, something that chilled him from the inside out. For a brief moment, Thomas saw the flicker of something dark in his eyes. It was barely perceptible, but it was there, resentment, masked behind a thin, practiced smile. The moment passed so quickly that no one else noticed, but Thomas couldn't unsee it. It was as if Daniel's true feelings were laid bare in that instant, and for the first time, Thomas felt the weight of betrayal pressing on his chest. For years, he had ignored the gnawing feeling in his gut, brushing off the odd comments and strange reactions. He had made excuses for Daniel's behavior, telling himself that maybe it was just a misunderstanding or a bad day. But now, in that one fleeting moment, everything fell into place. Daniel wasn't a friend. Not in the way Thomas had believed. Daniel had never been truly happy for him. He had always seen Thomas not as a companion, but as something else, something to either compete with or control. That realization was like a slap in the face, a cold bucket of water dousing the warmth of their years together. Thomas didn't lash out. Instead, he pulled back, deciding to observe. He watched closely, paying attention to the way Daniel spoke to him, how he responded to both good and bad news, how he behaved during difficult conversations. Slowly, the pattern began to emerge with painful clarity. Daniel wasn't a friend, but a shadow of one. He wanted to be close to Thomas, not out of genuine care or affection, but for his reasons. Reasons that were likely driven by insecurity, competition, or envy. Maybe Daniel didn't even realize it himself. But for Thomas, it was impossible to ignore anymore. The years of false camaraderie had come crashing down, revealing the truth in all its starkness. Act 2. 5 Subtle Signs of Falsehood and Envy. Thomas had always prided himself on his ability to read people, but there was something about Daniel that unsettled him. The more he thought about it, the more certain he became. Something wasn't right. It wasn't just a feeling. It was the subtle way Daniel's behavior seemed to tug at his intuition. He knew he had to dig deeper, not just brush it off. And so, he began to pay attention. It didn't take long before Thomas realized that there were 5 distinct patterns in Daniel's actions. 5 red flags that, when pieced together, unveiled the truth. The truth that Daniel's presence, once comforting, had now become tainted with falsehoods and hidden jealousy. Over-the-top agreement and flattery. At first, Thomas had chalked it up to camaraderie. It was always pleasant to have someone who nodded along with everything he said, wasn't it? When Thomas raved about a new restaurant, Daniel echoed his sentiment. When Thomas talked about a movie, Daniel's response was always, "That's exactly how I feel." It was flattering. Who doesn't enjoy the company of someone who makes you feel validated at every turn? But then it dawned on him, this wasn't normal. A real friend doesn't simply echo everything you say. A real friend challenges you, encourages you to think deeper, helps you see a different side of things when you're too stuck in your perspective. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. That's when the little voice in Thomas's head told him to test it. So one day, casually, he tossed out an opinion he didn't even believe in, something completely absurd. And sure enough, Daniel replied without hesitation, "That's a great point. I've always thought the same thing." That was the moment Thomas knew. Daniel wasn't being his authentic self. He was playing a role, carefully curated to keep Thomas's approval. But why? Was it because he feared the rejection of showing his true colors? Or was there something deeper, something insidious about his need to stay in Thomas's good graces? Jealousy disguised as support. Thomas had always been the kind of person to celebrate his wins, big or small. It didn't matter if it was a career milestone, finishing a personal project, or even accomplishing something as small as reading a new book. But every time he shared his victories with Daniel, something felt off. Daniel's smile would linger a little too long, and his congratulations always sounded rehearsed. "That's amazing, Thomas," Daniel would say, but then the undercurrent would slip through, like a shadow lurking beneath his words. "I didn't even know they were still hosting those events. Must not be as competitive as it used to be." At first, Thomas dismissed it as a coincidence, but the pattern was undeniable. Daniel never outright criticized him, but there was always a slight undercut hidden in every compliment. The smile would mask a deeper feeling, a feeling of envy that was so well disguised, Thomas almost didn't see it. But envy, like any poison, seeps in quietly, and Thomas couldn't ignore it any longer. It wasn't support he was receiving, it was the facade of it, tinged with unspoken resentment. And that, Thomas realized, was the most dangerous form of jealousy, creating doubt through guilt. As Thomas began focusing more on his personal growth, exercising, reconnecting with old friends, and prioritizing his well-being, he noticed something else. Daniel's demeanor shifted. "I miss the way things used to be," he would say, his tone laden with an almost imperceptible sadness. At first, Thomas felt a pang of guilt. Had he been neglecting his friend? Was he being selfish by choosing to focus on himself? But the more he thought about it, the more he understood what was happening. Daniel wasn't missing their friendship. He was missing control. He was trying to pull Thomas back into his orbit, back into the dynamic they had shared, where Daniel's needs had always been at the center. And suddenly, Thomas saw it clearly. This was a tactic to make him feel guilty for taking care of himself. He was supposed to feel bad for prioritizing his peace. But a real friend wouldn't do that. A real friend would celebrate your growth, even if it meant less time together. And in that moment, Thomas knew, Daniel's words were just another manipulation. Rushing trust and deep bonds too quickly. When Daniel and Thomas first met, their connection felt immediate. Daniel was quick to share personal stories, deep fears, and struggles. So quick it left Thomas with a sense of unease. Was this what real friendships looked like? The intensity of the bond seemed almost too fast, too deep, too soon. Daniel bared his soul as though they had known each other for years, a familiarity that felt unnatural. At the time, Thomas hadn't questioned it. But now, reflecting on their relationship, he realized something. Trust is earned, not rushed. Real bonds take time to cultivate, built over years of shared experiences, mutual respect, and genuine understanding. But Daniel, he had used this quick emotional intimacy to create a sense of obligation. The transparency was a weapon, not an invitation for closeness. It was an expectation, a tool used to make Thomas feel indebted, like he had to open up in return. And that sense of obligation was something Thomas could never ignore again. Never taking responsibility. The final pattern became clear over time, when Thomas noticed Daniel's response to mistakes. It was never his fault. If Daniel was late, it was always someone else's fault. If he forgot something, it was because he'd been distracted. If he hurt someone's feelings, it was because they were too sensitive. Daniel never once took responsibility for his actions. And Thomas saw the danger in that. People like Daniel never take ownership of their mistakes. They twist situations, manipulate perceptions, and avoid accountability at all costs. One day, Thomas decided to confront Daniel about something he had said, something that had been hurtful. But instead of an apology or an admission of guilt, Daniel's response was a sharp deflection. "I only said that because you made me feel left out." And just like that, Thomas understood. People who refuse to take responsibility will, over time, turn your self-reflection against you. They'll make you question your feelings, your actions, and leave you doubting yourself. It was a game, and Thomas was no longer willing to play. In each of these moments, Thomas felt his heart heavy with the weight of realization. It wasn't that Daniel was a bad person. He just wasn't real. And as painful as it was, Thomas knew he had to let go of this illusion. Because in the end, true friendship is built on honesty, support, and mutual respect. Not manipulation, false flattery, and hidden envy. Act 3. Thomas's decision. The moment Thomas faced the undeniable truth, his heart felt torn. He knew, deep down, that he was standing at a crossroad, an intersection between his past comfort and the uncertain future that awaited him if he chose to embrace change. It wasn't easy. Daniel had been a fixture in his life for so long, a constant presence through thick and thin. The thought of letting go, especially of someone who had been there for years, was like a weight settling heavily in his chest. Even when everything inside of him screamed that the time had come, he hesitated. What if he was wrong? What if he was just being too harsh, too quick to judge? It was easy to second-guess himself, to question whether he was imagining things. But deep down he knew. The confusion he felt around Daniel wasn't normal. Every time they spoke, something shifted inside him, like a quiet storm cloud hovering overhead. Conversations that once felt easy and comforting now left him drained, uncertain, and even questioning his worth. There was a constant sense of tension, of self-doubt creeping into his mind long after the conversation ended. Why did Daniel make him feel this way? Why did he start second-guessing everything? Thomas began to understand something that had been difficult for him to admit. This wasn't a friendship built on mutual respect and support. It was a relationship that had evolved into something unhealthy. He realized, with painful clarity, that real friendship should nurture your soul, not leave you in a constant state of emotional disarray. A true friend should make you feel loved, secure, and valued, not as though you're walking on eggshells, wondering what went wrong after every interaction. So, with a heart heavier than he expected but clear in his resolve, Thomas made a decision. He didn't need a dramatic scene or a long, drawn-out explanation. The kind of closure he needed wasn't wrapped up in words. It was in action. It was in quiet strength, in the subtle refusal to continue playing a role he no longer wanted to. He simply stepped back. He stopped reaching out first, stopped initiating the small talk, and let the silence fill the spaces where there used to be regular conversations. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel compelled to share his struggles, his thoughts, his achievements with Daniel. He stopped giving pieces of himself to someone who no longer earned them. Instead, he turned to those who made him feel whole, the ones who radiated honesty, warmth, and unconditional support. These were the people who, without ever asking, celebrated his successes and truly wanted the best for him. They encouraged him to grow, to be himself, without the whispers of judgment or passive-aggressive comments. Slowly but surely, Daniel reached out, sensing the distance but unaware of the reason. When Thomas didn't respond the way he once did, when his usual eagerness to keep up the facade faded, the rift between them grew naturally. And much to his surprise, Thomas didn't feel the crushing weight of guilt that he feared. Instead, he felt a sense of freedom, like a long-held breath finally exhaled. It was as though the chains of obligation and disappointment had been lifted, and for the first time in years, he could breathe. He felt lighter, stronger, and most importantly, he felt at peace. By removing a source of negativity, he had made space for authentic, genuine connections. Connections that added light to his life instead of casting shadows. And as he walked this new path, Thomas understood the profound power of choosing peace over comfort, even when the comfort was all he had known. Protecting your peace. Thomas's story strikes a chord with so many of us. We've all experienced it, haven't we? That person who seems to walk into our lives with the energy of a friend, someone who, at first glance, feels genuine, kind, and trustworthy. We open our hearts, thinking we've found a companion who will be there through thick and thin. But then, over time, something doesn't feel right. At first, it's a whisper in the back of your mind, an unsettling feeling that you can't quite place. Slowly, but surely, little things start to shift. The words they say don't seem to align with the actions they take. Their support feels like a performance, always conditional, always tied to something they can gain or something they want from you. And worst of all, their presence doesn't fill you with joy or reassurance, but rather leaves you questioning your worth, doubting your instincts, and second-guessing yourself. It's like being surrounded by a fog, where clarity and confidence seem so distant. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 2 below to let me know that you are still here with me. The truth is, not everyone we meet is meant to stay in our lives forever. Some people are simply passing through, arriving with important lessons wrapped in layers we may not immediately recognize. They come into our world to teach us about the boundaries we need to establish, about the types of energy we should no longer tolerate, and about how precious our peace is. These individuals, while they may seem harmless at first, have a way of revealing to us what we need to protect ourselves from in the future. It's like an awakening, a hard lesson that we must endure before we can truly embrace the power of saying no to the wrong kind of energy. If you've ever found yourself in the company of someone who makes you feel uneasy, yet you can't put your finger on why, it's time to pause and reflect deeply. Take a moment, breathe, and let the signs reveal themselves to you. Ask yourself these 5 questions, because they're crucial to understanding when your peace is at risk. Over-the-top agreement and flattery. Are they constantly agreeing with everything you say, but it feels hollow? Do they throw compliments your way that feel more like attempts to manipulate than genuine praise? Real friendships involve honest opinions, not just blind agreement. Pay attention to this. It's a red flag. Jealousy disguised as support. Do they make subtle comments that undermine your success? When you achieve something significant, do they find a way to downplay it or, worse, make you feel guilty for your victories? These people might wear the mask of a supporter, but their true colors reveal themselves in their passive-aggressive words. They're not your cheerleaders, they're rooting for their agenda, not your growth. Creating doubt through guilt. Have you noticed a pattern where they subtly make you feel guilty for changing, growing, or stepping into your power? Guilt is a powerful weapon, and some people are skilled at using it to keep you small, to keep you from evolving into the person you're meant to be. They want you to stay stagnant, in the space where you were when they first met you, so that you can remain convenient for them. Rushing trust and deep bonds too quickly. Do they push you into sharing personal details, trust, and deep conversations almost immediately? Healthy relationships take time to develop. They require mutual respect, understanding, and a foundation built on genuine connection. But when someone rushes it, it often comes from a place of manipulation. They want access to your vulnerabilities before you're ready to give them. Take a step back when this happens. Never taking responsibility. Do they always have an excuse, a justification, or a way to avoid taking responsibility for their actions? In moments of conflict or mistakes, do they deflect, deny, or manipulate the situation so that they remain blameless? Accountability is the cornerstone of any healthy relationship. When someone refuses to take ownership of their actions, they're revealing that they cannot be trusted to respect you or your boundaries. We must protect our peace at all costs. It is not selfish, it is necessary. Life is too short to allow toxic people to thrive in our inner circle. It's painful to admit when someone we've let in isn't good for us, but it's even more painful to allow them to continue draining our energy and damaging our sense of self-worth. Trust your gut. It knows more than you think. You deserve relationships that uplift, inspire, and respect you. Not ones that make you feel diminished, confused, or emotionally exhausted. It's time to choose peace over loyalty to those who do not deserve your heart. Thank you for taking the time to dive into this important topic with us today. I hope you've gained some valuable insights into the importance of protecting your peace and recognizing when relationships are no longer serving your highest good. So, what have you learned so far? What was the most eye-opening realization for you? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please take a moment to comment below and share one thing you've learned today that you're going to practice in your own life. If you like this video, don't forget to leave your comment, give us a thumbs up, share it with someone who could benefit, and of course, subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on more content designed to empower and inspire you. Until next time, take care of your peace and keep thriving.